Ukraine is about to join NATO. Not so fast. If that happens, Russia loses its mind. They're talking about World War III. So why is Putin so obsessed with keeping Ukraine out? At the end of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union had a grand total of 57,000 nuclear warheads aimed at each other. It was a terrifying standoff where one wrong move could trigger Armageddon. Both sides spent a fortune on weapons and military bases. The Soviets built their empire of death across Eastern Europe, while the US stationed missiles in Western Europe, only 90 miles from Moscow. And then came the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, when the Soviets put missiles in Cuba, only 90 miles from Florida. For Kennedy, that was a red line, a complete game changer. In fact, he considered launching a full-scale invasion of Cuba to remove them. Kennedy ultimately chose diplomacy over war, but it goes to show how sensitive borders are when it comes to security. Well, fast forward to today and suddenly Ukraine joining NATO looks a lot like the Cuban Missile Crisis, all over again. Here's why. Ukraine is on Russia's border. Ukraine has good relations with NATO, and Ukraine wants to join. That means American missiles would be 300 miles from Moscow, American fighter jets just minutes away from Russian airspace, and American warships in the Black Sea surrounding Crimea. All of that is a red line for Putin. It makes him paranoid because he knows those bases will spy on Russia, collect intelligence, and potentially launch attacks. We already have NATO troops in Eastern Europe, including in Poland and the Baltic states. But Ukraine is different. If Ukraine joins, it'll be like the US putting missiles in Cuba. And that will fundamentally change the balance of power in Europe. That's why Putin is so obsessed with Ukraine's neutrality. It's not about principle, it's about security. And deep down, he knows NATO won't allow Ukraine to join. But there's another secret reason why Putin fears NATO so much. In 1991, the Soviet Union fell apart. The empire collapsed and the nations of Eastern Europe started turning west, embracing democracy and capitalism. Soon, countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined NATO and the European Union. One by one, all of them used to be part of the Soviet sphere of influence. That stung for the Russians. They felt betrayed, and Putin took it personally. When he came to power in 2000, he promised to restore Russia's greatness. He wanted to rebuild the Soviet Union and make Russia the dominant power in Eastern Europe once again. The problem? Every single nation he ruled over was becoming richer and freer. As more and more countries embraced the West, Putin felt isolated. His propaganda machine went into overdrive. Soon, he was calling NATO a remnant of the Cold War. And remember, according to Putin, the Cold War never ended. Well, that's not true. NATO didn't invade him. They didn't attack him. They offered him partnership and cooperation. But that wasn't enough. For Putin, NATO became the new great Satan. And now he wants to destroy them. He wants to build a new Russian empire around him, and he'll stop at nothing to achieve it. So here's what we'll likely see. Now that Ukraine wants to join NATO, Putin will push back harder. Expect more cyber attacks, false flag operations, and covert propaganda campaigns. The goal, make Ukraine look like a monster and rally the Russian people to invade. And sure, he'll use NATO as an excuse, but it's all about control. At its core, Ukraine joining NATO is a threat to Putin's power. He can't accept a free Ukraine succeeding right next door, and that's why he'll never let Ukraine join the alliance. Ever since the Soviet Union fell, Putin has been trying to restore its borders, but now, thanks to Ukraine, that dream is dying. A democratic, prosperous Ukraine is the last thing Putin wants, and that's why he's so obsessed with crushing it. Now Putin has already tried to make Ukraine bend to his will. Remember the 2004 Orange Revolution, when Ukraine rejected a pro-Russian leader? Or the 2014 Maidan uprising, which ousted a pro-Russian president? Each time, Putin responded by taking territory. First, he took Crimea, then he backed separatists in the Donbass region. But that's not enough for him. He wants total control. And that brings us to the most dangerous possibility, World War III. If Ukraine joins NATO, Putin's empire building will collapse. He won't accept that. In fact, he'd rather wage war against the entire alliance. Now, that doesn't mean he wants a direct war. Instead, he'll support separatists, fund proxy armies, and back terrorists. Think about the Russian invasion of Afghanistan or the war in Syria. Those were disasters for Russia. But Putin will keep trying until something works. And that's why we should take him seriously when he talks about burning Ukraine to the ground. Now, I know this conflict seems far away, but it's not. What happens in Ukraine will impact all of us. In fact, it already has. Oil prices have skyrocketed, inflation is spreading across Europe, and Americans are paying more at the gas pump. So stay tuned. This story is just getting started.